Alright, now let's begin where we left off in the last class. In this lecture, we will explore loops in Python using lists and dictionaries, and we also understand how the while loops work through some examples. Now let me open Jupyter Notebooks, and I'm using Mac operating system. You need to search and on the navigator, and that same process applies to Windows operating system. You just need to search and on the navigator, and after that you have to launch the Jupyter Notebooks, and it will automatically open into your default browser. Okay, it will automatically open to your default browser, and then you can work anywhere. So now I'm going to navigate to the folder where we were working in the last class, and that folder is on the desktop, and the folder name was Python. All right, and I'm going to create a new file here, and that will be again an Python interactive notebook. That's why we have extension here ipynb. Otherwise, if you have to create Python file, the extension will be .py. All right, so we are working with interactive Python notebooks. That's why we have this extension here. Now let me rename this file, and the file name is loops through lists and dictionaries. Okay, so the same rules also applies to rename your files. For instance, the same rule that we have to declare variables. All right, and I'm using underscore. Okay, that's a good practice, because sometime we have to import or include the same file, include this file into another file. So if you have spaces there, then it will create problems for you to include that file. All right, so that would be that's the name of the file. So that's a good practice always to rename your file, because untitled means nothing. All right, now let me create a list here, and that would be, let's say, my list has some values inside, and these values, let's again assume that we have some string values separate with comma, and we have integer value. Let's also have some decimal values, 5 point, let's say 11, and let's put some company names, and that would be, let's say, Burger King, and another value, let's assume, let's say, a Sony. So how many elements we have, that items elements, how many elements we have in this list? At this point we have 1 2 3 4 and 5, and I think there is a built-in function that can be used to count the number of elements we have in this list. That would be a len length, and thus we have 5 elements there. All right, and if I have to extract, let's assume 34, let's assume that's 34 is my age, and that element is on index, 0 and 1. All right, that's the traditional way of extracting elements. And if I have to extract all these elements, because I'm doing it some repetitive actions and repetitive tasks, the first element is on index 0, and that's on index 2. All right, and that then Burger King is index 3, and index 3, and the last one is on index 4. Okay, that's the way of extracting elements. And you are familiar that if you do not use print function, then the cell will execute the loss variable here. All right, so the loss variable is index of my list of 4, so it will show you the last values. But if you use print, then it will show you all these values. All right, so instead of using different print function, I'm going to put all these values inside this print function and separate with comma. All right, so these values will be extracted through this list. That's the traditional way of stuff. All right, just to print all these values. That's the traditional way of doing the stuff, because in today's lecture we're going to look at how we can use loops to extract these all elements. And also while loops are also important, because there are chances, because we are doing some repetitive tasks, time consuming, there are chances that there may be some human errors, and machines are very efficient for doing repetitive tasks. All right, and the first loop we have is for loop. All right, And the for syntax here in Python is that we going to use the keyword as for, and then we have, you familiar that in other programming languages we have variable that is for I is equal to 0, I is equal to less than equal, that's a relational operator, less than 5. Let me write it as a markdown so we can look at what we see in Python here. That's a syntax we have for other programming languages, that is for, and we need a variable I start from, let's say 1, I less than equal to, let's say 5. We have 5 elements, and I plus plus, the step is 1. That's the traditional, that's not a traditional, that's a way of looping through that items. All right. And in Python it's somehow similar. We have the syntax is for, and we going to use an item is again a variable here, for item in where that we going to extract from this list. Okay, that's the syntax. That's a variable that is user defined. That means you can use a different variable name, maybe I here, but we have items here, that's why we use it item. And then we have a colon here. Colon means that we have the syntax for the for loop, and now we are inside the body of the for loop. You see, we are inside the body of the for loop. How? Because we have a one tab space from the beginning here. Okay, and that would be, we're going to use print an item. Okay, so we extracted all elements from this list. All right, and if you move, because I told you that the right now it's the body of the for loop, because if you work, let's assume you are working in another language, let's say C++, you have opening curly bracket and closing curly bracket, then you don't need to care about this tab space, because we know that we are inside the for loop body. But here in Python we have to use tab spaces, because assume you have again a nested loop, then we need again tab spaces to understand where we are right now inside the loop bodies. All right, now let me remove this space, so you can see that now the Python will generate an error, because you see they're saying the expected indented block, because it's not a block, for after for statement on line 1. Okay, so we do not have a lines here, but I think he assumed that this is the zero for that's the first line we have here, and that could be the tab space. And instead of doing stuff like manually using space 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can simply move this line above and hit enter. It automatically have a tab space there. All right, and now let me create a real world list and then loop through these items the similar way that we were doing here. And that would be, let's say we have a fast food companies. Okay, that would be name of my variable, and we have square bracket because it's going to be a list, and we have, let's say we have Papa John, and then we have another is Panera, and then we have another that item that would be a Burger King, and then another item we have is, let's say McDonald. Okay, that's the how many companies we have, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and I'm going to use, so you can also use to expand this cell. It doesn't mean that you can only work in this small space. So I just expanded it to make it bigger, because I'm going to write my all code here, and that would be for, let's say food companies is my variable in where I'm going to extract values. I'm going to extract values from here, and then I'm going to use the print function, and that we don't need a semicolon here. Sometime I get confused, so we don't need a semicolon here. Even if you put semicolon, I think it will not create any issue. That would be FC. Okay, you still have the same values. So again, Python is a very friendly language. if otherwise it will be a syntax error if we following another language protocols. All right, so you don't need a semicolon here. And so this is how we can use loops. Then we have dictionaries, and let me now create a dictionary. So we can also going to loop through a dictionary, and that would be, let me create a dictionary again, and that would be, let's say, let me copy from the slide instead of creating a dictionary, because you're familiar, the syntax is we have keys and values. I need to create keys and then values, and dictionaries have opening curly bracket and closing curly bracket. Okay, and I'm going to copy the dictionary from here. Okay, that's the dictionaries we have. Okay, just remember that we have keys and values, and we use to curly bracket to declare our dictionaries. Okay, and these spaces, again, I need to remove these spaces because otherwise it will become a part of the key. Okay, we need to remove these spaces. Why I got these spaces? Because I just copied pasted instead of typing. That's why we have these spaces. Otherwise that would not be a problem. And I told you one function that is used to look at the type of your variable. It's always a good practice to see first what kind of variable we have. That's a dictionary, it's a dict type. Okay, because sometime you trying to loop through dictionaries and it's not a dictionary, then it will create a problem. Let me show you what kind of problems we're going to have. I'm going to use print, and let me put this print function inside, because now we have keys and values, so we need to extract these both values using using their key. All right, if I print this one, and you see that's opening curly bracket and that's a closing curly bracket, that's it's a dictionary, and that's we need to give a reference to the key, and and then we also need to give a reference to its values. That's why we need a two variables in this case instead of using a one variable to extract values from these dictionaries. And that would be for, let's say, company separate comma, that's the second variable we're going to use, and that would be a category, and in where we're going to extract from this one dot items, because we have items here, because they are associated to each other, and we have items. That's the first item, and that's the second item, and that's the third item. Okay, and then let me now just print, let's print just first the company name. So we have company and their category. If I run through this, and it will print out these all keys we have. Keys are company names, and these are their categories. Let me show you one more function to deal with dictionaries. Okay, because you must be confused with this one, why directly you jump to company's items. So let's say if we use company keys, print food companies and keys. Yes, that's the built-in function we have. So these are the keys we have. So it's saying it's a dictionary keys, and that's a list inside. Okay, that's a list inside. That's a list of values we have there. And I think the second one is keys, and these would be values. Okay, and that would be company dot values. Yes, that's the function, and that's the closing bracket of the print method that we have outside. Okay, so that's opening and that's the closing. So we have keys and values, and both are as items. Okay, so we have keys and we also have values. Okay, let me move this to a next line so you can differentiate between these two. So these are the keys we have, and these are the values we have in that dictionary. So that would be print, and okay, these are the values, you see. So these are associated to each other, and to extract both of them at the same time using loops, we use food companies dot items. Okay, we have these items. All right, So you can also put conditions inside. So it doesn't mean that that loop is only used to extract elements or items from lists or dictionaries. You can even use let's assume that you also have a tuples. You can use to extract values from tuple as well. And we can also put conditions inside. Let me put one condition here. Okay, that would be, we are familiar with the syntax. That would be if FC food company is equal to let's say Burger King, then now you see, now I again need a tab space because that tab space was a part of a for function, but now I need a tab space so that it becomes a part of if condition, and that will be a tab space here again. If it is equal to Burger King, then print, let's say, I found, you see, I found Burger King because Burger King is there. Or maybe you can do another operation on that one. Let's assume, how can we do another operation? Let's see, let's create a new sequence, and that would be in sequence, and that would be list 1 2 3 4 and 5, and I'm 4 and 6 7 8 10. So I'm going to print even numbers from here. Okay, that's how we can understand better how can we put conditions inside the loop. And that would be for, let's say, I in int sequence, and that's the list we have. And I'm going to print, let's first always print values first. So these are the values here, and now I need to put a condition. That would be if I, we take the modulus, if we take the modulus with 2 is equal to the remainder. If the remainder is 0, then print I. Okay, so now we have the even numbers there. Okay, so this is how we can also put condition inside the loop body. Okay, and in case, and what else we can do here? I think that's enough. Now let's move to while loop. While loop, the syntax is that we have to start the loop and need to put the condition, and also need a step there as well. And for the while loop, let's assume that we have a variable I is equal to 1. Oh, again I put semicolon, you don't need a semicolon here. And that would be while, and while that would be I. You're familiar that in other programming language you also need this opening and closing parentheses. I think it doesn't matter if you do not use, but I think it's not going to be a problem. Let's I is equal less than equal to 5, then print I. Okay, print I, and that's again a tab space. So this loop will run infinite time because we do not put any condition to stop this loop because there is no step there. And that will be I plus plus. Oh, I plus plus, there's no I plus plus here. In Python I think I is equal to I plus 1, and that's the way of sometime, because I teach different programming languages, and I plus plus in C plus plus is just a step of 1. So here we have to explicitly say that the step is 1 here. All right, then there is another function. You see, that's the print function. There is another function that we can use, is a format. Okay, that would be format, and it takes a value. Let me write it down, and then you get the idea that that's a string part. I is, and then we have a placeholder here. That's a placeholder where we will put the value of I, and that would be a format function. And what we want to format the value of I, and that's the closing of the print function that is outside. Okay, now it will just, so this is just a placeholder, and the I value will automatically come here. Okay, so I is 1 2 3 4 and 5. All right, then we have another function, another loop in Python, we use a range function. Range function generates a sequence of numbers, and it also commonly used with loops. Okay, because let's say you need to iterate through let's say uh let's say yes, from list, and from list indexes you can put indexes there and it automatically extract values from there. Let me explain this concept that we have for I in range, and the range is let's say 5, and now I'm going to print and print I. Okay, so the loop automatically start from 0, the step is 1 and up to 5, and this range function has start, stop and step. Let's start from 1 up, stop 5, and the step is 1. Okay, now the loop will stop 1 2 3 4, so it's start, stop and step. All right, that makes sense. And let's have the step is 2. You have now start from 1, the step is 3. You see now the first value is 1, the second value is 3 here. I think now you can also change this step, the start and 1 to 10, and the step is 2. Now it will print even numbers 2 6 and 8. All right, and let's what else we can do in functions. I think that's enough. Let me look at what we have in the slides. We covered let me see. Loops, for loop. So these were the companies, and for company in fast food companies, and we also loop through dictionaries, and while range function, range with list indexing. So it's going to print values fast food companies of 0 index, first index, 2 index. So you can also use a range function there to extract values. All right, so in the next class we're going to look at functions. That would be the last topic in introduction to Python, and after that the next section will be about pandas, and the second section we're going to start the data analysis that includes pandas and numpy. And yes, I will see you in the next class. In the next class we're going to see functions.